Christmas is observed by nearly 1/3 of the world's population. And probably more if you count the non-Christians who incorporate some of the more secular traditions into their winter season. So as holy days and holidays go, Christmas is a pretty big deal. Holidaymakers go all out. Trees heavy with decorations, elaborate lighting schemes, edibles and presents galore. In a city as culturally diverse as New York City, many regional traditions come together to form one spectacular display of Christmas spirit. Each year, the Big Apple tries to outdo the last, with millions of colored lights, illuminating buildings and streets, and impressive store window decorations encouraging revelers to buy, buy, buy. The focal point of it all, the Rockefeller Center tree, presides majestically over a seasonal skating rink and attracts throngs of visitors to Midtown Manhattan. It usually stands between 75 and 90 feet tall and is at least 35 feet wide. Each year, the giant conifer is chosen many months in advance.
In the middle of the winter, when deciduous trees have no leaves, I look by helicopter for a giant Norway spruce. It's a non-native tree that's found in people's front or backyards, and I look on my computer and mark the GPS location of the tree, and I'm very happy when I find one, and so are the people. It's a great surprise when I knock on their door and say, "I'm from Rockefeller Center, I'm interested in your tree."
In early November, the selected tree is prepped for cutting.
We use a 160-ton crane to corset the tree so it can fold up. A crane is positioned over the tree and slowly draws up the branches, ties it up more tightly so the tree can fit on a specially designed truck. The tree has a truck that's an accordion. It can stretch or contract depending on the tree, whether it's 80 feet or 90 feet or 100 feet.
The chosen tree is hailed from many different areas. It's transported on the custom-made telescoping trailer that travels a carefully planned route with a police escort. Depending on the distance, sometimes the truck hitches a ride on a plane or barge. Once the tree arrives at Rockefeller Center, workers raise and stabilize it.
And the tree is hoisted into place and held by a crane, and 4 cables are attached that go off, 2 to the building and 2 to the wall of the ice rink from the midpoint of the tree. And the tree has a stainless steel spike driven into the bottom of the trunk, and that's placed into a hole or a cup and then holds it as a pinpoint so that the bottom can't move. We have master riggers and engineers who calculate the weight loads and the weight load if there's snow or ice or water on the tree.
Balancing precariously on 8 stories of scaffolding, 24 electricians decorate the tree with 30,000 colored lights attached to 5 miles of wiring. A 9.5-foot diameter crystal star, crafted by Swarovski of Austria, is placed atop the tree.
The Swarovski star weighs close to 600 pounds. 25,000 crystals make 1 million facets, which ensure that the star sparkles day and night on top of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree.
A few days after every Thanksgiving, a huge celebrity-studded crowd of thousands gathers as the tree lights up for the first time. Good times for everyone. But the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree tradition was born in bad times.
Rockefeller Center was built during the Great Depression. In 1931, the first year of construction, the workers felt fortunate to have a job and to have a paycheck. and they got the first Christmas tree, a 20-foot balsam fir, to celebrate the holidays.
The custom has never faltered, not even during the war years, nor in 2001 after 9/11. This popular contemporary tradition likely finds its roots in ancient times. Some scholars believe that the pagan cultures of Northern Europe associated evergreens with the renewal of life, because they stayed green throughout winter. This symbol was eventually attached to the Roman winter feast, celebrated on the winter solstice day of December 25th, the day with the least sunlight, according to the Julian calendar. As Christianity prevailed, the festival became the celebration of Christ's birth, taking with it some of the pagan symbols to ease the transition. In the Middle Ages, Germanic tribes brought the revered evergreens indoors as a sign of hope for the coming spring. As these cultures moved throughout Europe, their traditions followed.
It's said that Prince Albert, who was married to Queen Victoria of England, of course, was instrumental in popularizing the Christmas tree in England. There were illustrations published in English newspapers of the royal family celebrating with a Christmas tree. So that really popularized the custom because British people of that time followed the fashions of the royal family and the nobility. You also have German people bringing the Christmas tree to America as they began to emigrate in greater numbers in the 19th century.
The tradition grew and spawned a flourishing trade. Of the roughly 30 million real trees sold in the U.S. each year, about 25% are harvested in Oregon, 11% in North Carolina, and 10% in Michigan. The rest come from all over the country. For those who love the fresh smell of a real evergreen in their living rooms, cut trees can be purchased and carted home from any of the lots that sprout up in November. Or maybe you prefer something a bit more highbrow. Yule Tree Farms of Aurora, Oregon, specially cultivates trees that will bear the tag of excellence. The 3,800-acre facility has introduced the first designer Christmas tree, turning a commodity into a trademarked brand name. Oregon's noble vintage fir is carefully bred to have the most desired characteristics. A bluish-green hue, soft upturned needles, and better needle retention than other types of evergreens. These premium trees retail for about 30% more than other trees and represent less than 5% of the market. Yule Tree Farms also grows several other evergreen species. While just about every pine, fir, and spruce has held the exalted position of family Christmas tree, the most commonly used are the balsam, Fraser, and Douglas firs.
This is a field of Douglas fir Christmas trees here. They're 2 years old. In this particular block, there's between 3 and 4 million. The average height here is 18 inches. They've reached their full growing potential for this year.
After 2 growing seasons in the seedling nursery, the trees are transplanted into the fields. Workers will continuously inspect the trees for disease, sunburn, fungus, and unwanted pests. But not all pests are unwanted. While many other growers continue to randomly spray pesticides using helicopters, Yule Tree Farms employs a relatively new, progressive pest control philosophy.
We use a program called Integrated Pest Management. There are predator bugs as well as the bugs that attack the trees. We support the predator insects that eat the other insects. We recognize that we need to be very careful with these pesticides. If we find a pocket where the population has increased to a point where it's going to cause damage, we try to hit that spot.
Localizing pesticide spray over vast fields is a challenge. To do it by hand would be costly and painstaking. Heavy machinery could damage the ground. So it takes a special vehicle to tread lightly and spray precisely.
The GK tracker allows the boom to be right on the trees and direct the spray exactly where it's needed and not have the risk of spray drift, which is a big concern. In the past, there wasn't a machine that could get across the wet ground here in Oregon. The sprayer that we use has a minimal impact. The footprint is less than what your heel is as you walk across the field. Part of that's due to the length of the track, but it's the disbursement or the weight of the machine.
The trees grow in the fields for about 8 to 10 years to reach maturity. Once every growing season, a shearing team moves through the field, expertly swinging their blades.
For shearing Christmas trees, you need 3 main pieces of equipment: a machete, clippers, and a leg protector. On this particular tree, we have the top splinted with a bamboo, and that's just to provide a nice straight leader for the tree, for a star or angel or anything else that would go on top of a tree. The next thing you watch for is the top whorl, the branches, the first whorl of branches that come off the tree. You want them to be about 8 to 10 inches long in length, and we just follow that line from the top all the way down to provide a nice smooth line that keeps the trees nice and full, yet providing access points for Christmas tree ornaments. When you're shearing a Christmas tree, you have to assess each tree as an individual. It's kind of like a haircut. Not everybody looks good with the same haircut.
Just before the harvest, taggers mark the best trees according to height. Then it's time to cut them down, using a chainsaw with a safer and faster bow bar. And next comes a step that's a huge relief for anyone who's ever had to clean up the mess come January. Mechanical shakers knock the excess needles off the tree. Finally, the trees are sent through the baler to be trussed and twined, and then loaded onto refrigerated trucks for delivery across North America to a tree lot near you. The tree is just step one of many in the hall decking extravaganza. After all, what's a tree without strings of flashing, bubbling, flickering lights strewn across it? 'Tis the season of lights. And it's pretty obvious at Mike Simkowski's house in Sherman Oaks, California. Here in the land of endless summer, Mike replicates the winter spirit by producing a captivating choreographed outdoor light show, to the delight or dismay of his neighbors. First, he programs selected music into a software program called Animation Director that will synchronize lighting cues to the music track. Then he rigs up props and lights that plug into controllers hidden around the yard. And the magic of technology takes over.
The controllers are fed by the cables, which are fed from the controller called the Monster Brain, which sends the signals out to each controller and then tells the controller if it needs to be on or off, fade or dim or flicker. The highlight of the display is a 16-foot tree, which I created out of PVC. Inside the tree, I actually have a spotlight, which is a DMX-controlled intelligent light. The light is programmed to sweep the house and also project patterns onto the house, like falling snowflakes, sparkles, or whatever I can think of. The thing about the computer-controlled lighting is it's very efficient. So most lights are on and off quite a bit, so I'm never really drawing that much power at one time. So I don't see that much change in my electric bill each season.
Mike and other outdoor decorating enthusiasts are taking Christmas into the 21st century. Step inside Mike's holiday home, where nothing says Merry Christmas like a tree with all the trimmings. Electric Christmas lights became popular in the 20th century. But the idea of illuminating a Christmas tree is centuries old. According to folklore, in the early 1500s, Martin Luther was the first to place candles on an evergreen in winter to imitate twinkling stars and to symbolize Christ as the light of the world. Still, there's no official documentation of a lit tree until well over a century later.
Candles were put on trees because people were using candles anyway to celebrate Christmas. For one, it's pretty dark in Northern Europe at Christmas time, and they represented the birth of light after the winter solstice.
But there were some obvious potential hazards associated with this practice.
There are actually two things that are dangerous about it. One of them was, of course, having the candle fall over on a fairly dry tree. And that's why people would have a bucket of water on the floor whenever they lit up the Christmas tree. The other thing that nobody thinks about is the fact that little girls in particular and women would lean into the tree to look at something and set their clothes on fire from the lower candles.
It was actually only around the late 19th century when people began to devise fairly secure and safe ways of attaching the candles to the trees. Of course, by that time, electric lights were invented, and they would soon take over and make Christmas tree lighting a lot safer.
At the turn of the 20th century, electricity was still in its infancy. Only the wealthy could afford the luxury of holiday lights.
These were expensive and they were complicated to connect. So you had to hire an electrician to get them going.
In 1903, General Electric introduced prefabbed series-wired light strings. The price tag for a string of 24 lights? $12, equal to a week's wages for the average person. In 1916, tungsten replaced the carbon filament, making the lights brighter and longer lasting. In the 1920s, mechanization of light bulb production made Christmas lights more affordable. Companies experimented with bulb sizes, shapes, and textures in an attempt to give the customer variety. And in 1946 came a real Christmas sensation.
That was the introduction of the Noma bubble light, which looked just like this one. It was the only light that moved and had a fantasy effect, and everybody just loved them.
A bubble light consists of a liquid-filled tube held above a small incandescent bulb by a plastic cup and cap. The liquid is methylene chloride, a chemical compound with a low boiling point, often used as a solvent in a wide variety of industrial applications. Inside the tube, a small mass of sugar or salt helps hold a thin amount of methylene chloride close to the lamp. The modest heat generated by the lamp is enough to cause the liquid to boil and then recirculate. The mass helps spread the bubbles. Like the holiday light sets of Christmas past, bubble lights came attached to sockets and wiring. While they were easy to hang, series-wired light sets had one infuriating fatal flaw. If just one bulb failed, the whole strand went dark because the electric circuit was broken. And it was no fun searching for the culprit. The solution to this big problem is a little mechanism, the shunt. Each bulb in a series has a coated or anodized aluminum wire wrapped around the base of the posts that support the filament. If the filament burns out, the coating on the wire burns off, allowing this wire to act as a shunt. This completes the circuit and keeps the set alight. But remove the bulb, and you've removed the shunt, causing the entire string to fail. For consumers, the shunt means one bad bulb won't spoil the whole string. The latest in Christmas lighting tech is the LED, or light-emitting diode.
An LED is simply a small wafer of silicon that, when electricity is run through it, illuminates. It uses a lot less power than an incandescent light bulb because it requires very little energy to illuminate a light-emitting diode. They can last extremely long time. Right now, the bulbs we're seeing last up to 50,000 hours. We're starting to see light-emitting diodes come out of our factories in the Far East that are spec'd at 200,000 hours of average life.
Unlike incandescent lights that glow white and require colored bulbs or envelopes, LEDs can actually emit lights of varying colors. A light-emitting diode has two semiconductor sides. One side contains extra electrons, and the other contains holes to catch the electrons. When voltage is applied, it causes the electrons to fill the holes, so the current can flow through the diode. As an electron falls into a hole, a photon is released in the process. The distance of the electron's fall determines the color of the photon. So by engineering an LED with holes of a specific depth, a single specified color can be emitted. But lights alone do not a holiday make. Hanging proudly alongside are the colorful ornaments. And some are definitely bigger than others. Hanging high above the intersection of 5th Avenue and 57th Street in New York City is a very unique and very big holiday ornament. The UNICEF crystal snowflake is a three-dimensional structure consisting of 12 double-sided branches. It's 28 feet high, 23 feet wide, and weighs in at 3,300 pounds. The ornament was conceived by renowned German lighting designer Ingo Mauer. Artisans at Baccarat in France hand-blew the individual crystals and shipped them to Germany, where Mauer's team completed the assembly.
These 16,000 Baccarat crystal prisms are attached with springs and silicone cushions, which ensure that in the worst of weather here in New York City, those prisms remain intact, attached to the polished stainless steel frame.
Each year, a team of engineers spends an entire night assembling and hoisting the snowflake into position.
It's great to work for a good cause, and we hope that the people do open their pockets and give generously, because the children in the world needs it very much.
Of course, not all holiday ornaments are created equal.
The first ornaments on Christmas trees were very simple things that a person might have around the home. Apples, pretzels, cookies, sugar candies, nuts, bits of colored paper twisted into fanciful shapes. By the 1800s, about the 1870s, when people started to buy Christmas ornaments.
The most popular of these were crafted from glass.
The first glass ornaments were made beginning sometime in the middle of the 19th century in the Thuringen area, which is in eastern Germany. The town of Lauscha is the place where the industry was centered until the early 20th century. Well, the first ornaments were blown by individual craftsmen in Lauscha and decorated by their families.
At New York State's Corning Museum of Glass, craftspeople recreated for modern marvels the traditional ornament-making methods of centuries past.
So this is the blowpipe. It's a stainless steel tube, and I'm going to gather a little bit of glass on the end of it. And to make the glass perfectly round and perfectly concentric with the blowpipe. There we go. Now I hold it straight down and I'll spin a couple of times to elongate the glass, and marver again, and now back into the furnace. Now into the dip mold or optic mold. So I lower it in and blow hard, then come out, and there are the ridges. I'm going to spin this to elongate it. and grab one end with the tweezers, hold it with the diamond shears, twist, cut off the excess, and blow hard.
As the molten glass cools, it must go back into the furnace to maintain malleability.
Back to the bench to finish up tightening this constriction. I want this to break easily, and now I'll break it off the blowpipe and form the suspension loop. I'll just cool it off a little and whack it, and it breaks right off. And here is a little bit of clear glass from which I'll form the suspension loop. Cut it, and I'll make the loop by twisting around that way.
Then it's into a 900-degree annealing oven, where the clear glass ornament will cool off slowly for 6 to 8 hours.
If you want a colored glass, you simply add typically a metallic oxide. The most common, best known one is cobalt oxide, which colors the glass blue. If you add copper, you can get a greenish blue kind of aquamarine color. If you add tin oxide, you get a beautiful opaque white.
The other common method of hand-making glass ornaments is called lamp working, which begins with a glass rod.
They would soften the rod over the flame of the torch and then blow it into a very thin ornament. And using tools, they could shape that.
Some of these ornaments had a silvery interior, first made from mercury or lead, and then later from silver nitrate and diluted formaldehyde. By the late 1880s, U.S. import of German-made ornaments was in high gear and would remain a profitable venture for the next 50 years. But verboten. The Corning Glass Works plant in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania took on the task of domestic ornament production. The market was practically guaranteed. Since 1926, Corning had been using a ribbon machine and a process known as puff and blow to mass-produce glass envelopes for light bulbs. The company determined that this machine could be modified to make ornament shapes, giving birth to mechanized ornament production. A glass melting tank sat above one end of the machine, feeding a constant stream of molten glass through 2 metal drums. The emerging flat ribbon of orange glowing glass lay on a series of plates, each with a hole in the center. Compressed air pushed the sagging form through the hole into a split mold that snapped together, giving the mass its final shape. The bulb was then tapped off and conveyed to a cooling area.
And what you have is a round bulb which has a hollow stem on it, so then it can go off and be finished into either a light bulb or a Christmas tree ornament.
By 1940, Corning was manufacturing 300,000 ornaments per day, compared to the 600 that could be made by a glass blower. Mass production took some of the artistry out of the process. But with a variety of molds, manufacturers could offer an assortment of ornament shapes at a fraction of the cost. Today, production of most holiday decorations has relocated to the Far East, far away from where it all began. Trees, lights, and ornaments are great ways to ensure that your house is dressed for the season. But wait till you see what the retail world does to encourage the Christmas and gift-buying spirit. In New York City, pre-holiday visits to department stores like Macy's and Lord & Taylor are family traditions. People line the streets for a chance to peer inside the store windows, where intricately designed and cleverly animated figures capture the imagination. Macy's Director of Windows, Paul Olszewski, works year-round with illustrators and fabrication companies like Spaeth Design.
They had to kind of tell me what I could and couldn't do, what was possible, what isn't possible, because my imagination is way out there and reality is somewhere over here. So it's kind of a meeting of two minds there.
You can't see it, it's up to the side, and then it's in the sunrise. But is it going?
The process starts with artist renderings and often a musical theme. The sketches are recreated using design software.
They're all done as CAD drawings nowadays. Our clients can see computer modeling of what their windows will look like before they actually see them in 3D. Once the production drawings are done, we have a number of departments that start simultaneously.
In the carpentry shop, information from the design software is input into the CNC router. It will cut out the desired shapes for window sets and props.
Everything that we make on this machine is brought into the computer behind me. We bring the file in there, and the machine uses that to guide itself over the material. The material that we can cut ranges from plywood to MDF to foam, aluminum, plexiglass. So we have a very large range of materials that we can cut things out of. As you can see, it's spinning at 18,000 RPM. This thing generates quite a lot of dust. So you need to have something like this to keep the air quality in the studio.
The CNC router is so smart, it even knows when to automatically change drill bit sizes for more precise operations. In the sculpting shop, latex is molded into body parts for Santas, elves, and a whole cast of characters awaiting assembly and posing. The lucky few will be taken to animation to have rods, levers, and linkages placed in their hollow body cavities. Then animators attach and program 110-volt motors. And it's off to costuming for the final touches. To compete with other stores, window designers have to keep coming up with ways to up the ante.
Another feature that was new at Macy's was an interactive component between the people that were watching the windows and what was going on inside. We have little touch-sensitive sensors actually mounted on the inside of the glass, and we had a number of things that would respond to this touch.
Depending on the display components, installation can happen from the outside or from the inside.
You got the awning frame above you. Come this way.
And in the case of Lord & Taylor, from underneath via hydraulic lift. The time and labor-intensive fabrication process and the use of software and specially engineered hardware is a far cry from how this all began.
Holiday store windows were something that originated at Macy's because of R.H. Macy's love of Barnum. Eventually he had such a collection that Barnum said, you now have these new windows. They had just expanded the store. Why don't you put together a display of them? Macy thought that was a great idea and that he should probably do it at Christmas time. It was such a popular attraction that year in New York, actually designed for his Christmas display windows. This was back in the early 1870s.
And this brought the public out in large numbers to see these novelties. And of course, the store owners hoped that once you looked on the outside of the windows, you would be tempted to come inside. It was part of shopping as entertainment, which of course has only grown in the 20th century.
Department store windows. Today, entire malls and commercial buildings take part in the decoration tradition. And for these large-scale projects, many turn to evergreen specialty of Denver, Colorado. Evergreen custom designs and builds giant holiday display pieces for indoor and outdoor exhibitions. Once the client approves the designs, welders get to work, building the inner frames for larger-than-life animals and snowflakes.
Metal shop, we give them to our hand assembly workers. They cover them with different kinds of mesh. Some of it's very fine, some of it's chicken wire we're creating. For the topiaries, we weave it with nylon foliage. For the oak deer, it just gets covered with oak that's attached with a hog ring gun. Then it's woven with lights, depending on what they need. Sometimes it's incandescent minis, sometimes it's LEDs. It just depends on the client.
The metal snowflake frames get special treatment. 3 coats of spray-on glue and green aluminum glitter.
I think that the versatility of what we can do here is really kind of just as big as your imagination can go. Whatever you can think of, we can do it.
And at the end, once all the decorations are up, nothing the most disrespected of all. Collins Street Bakery of Corsicana, Texas, takes Christmas production very seriously, even though their signature product has been the butt of many jokes. For 6 weeks of every year, Collins Street expands from 85 employees to about 700. Baking and shipping an astounding 33,000 fruitcakes per day. No matter how many eggnogs are lifted or candy canes curled, the undisputed heavyweight champ of Christmas culinary indulgences is fruitcake, like it or not. Fruitcakes are dense cakes made with nuts and candied fruit, often doused in copious amounts of brandy or rum. So what's not to like about the gift that keeps re-gifting? Ancient Egyptians who obviously didn't celebrate Christmas and pomegranate seeds with a barley mash, spices and preserved fruits, and for the first time called it by the name we use today, fruitcake.
In those days, people celebrated special occasions and they wanted something sweet. They pretty much had to use fruit. Sugar was not widely available. If you wanted something sweet, you had to use fruit or honey. And if you wanted to enrich it...
In 1896, Collins Street Bakery opened in Corsicana, a few blocks from where water drilling crews struck oil in 1894. A German immigrant baker, August Wiedemann, and his financial backer, local Texas businessman Tom McElwee, stumbled onto their own fortune. The secret to their success was an old Wiedemann family recipe for fruitcake that attracted an unusual clientele.
Back around, and they absolutely loved the fruitcake. He put a little fruitcake in their luggage, which then they took along with them, and they realized that it would travel, and they said, these are great. Is there any chance we could send these to our friends? And of course, they traveled so much, they had friends all over the world, and that's kind of how we got into the direct mail business.
Today, Collins Street Bakery continues to deliver its old world taste, but has expanded its...
Batches are pre-measured in boxes, dump in so many boxes of product. They mix up the, which is honey, water, and butter. It comes through a conveyor, and it fills into the bowl. Then they'll add the cherries later because the cherries, if mixed too long, will smash and turn the batter red. Then they roll it off here and they roll it over to the depositor,
which are then weighed for consistency. Then it's off to the...
About 2,400 of the medium-sized cake which we're baking at this time. The baking time is 1 hour and 15 minutes at about 310 degrees. Once we finish baking them, we will cool the cakes off and then...
Collins Street Bakery has put a modern twist on its old mail order business.
We ship to every place you can imagine.
How may I take your order, please?
One time we had somebody place a special order, wanted a cake delivered on Mount Kilimanjaro.
This container load is going all the way to New Zealand. And as for the rumor that fruitcakes last forever...
They just, as soon as they open it, they eat it up. But without refrigeration,
Our fruitcake will last for probably 8 to 10 weeks, maybe 6 months if it's in the freezer.
It's 12 days out the year to ensure it's party time again next December.